Our next breakout gets to the heart of farm to fashion and how we are driving sustainability. So what do we know? We know socially conscious consumers are increasingly demanding sustainable fashion. And we know that they're driving companies to innovate greener forms of fibre production. And in this session, you're going to hear a couple of extraordinary perspectives from industry. So would you please welcome to the stage with a big rock star welcome after morning tea, Sam Elsom, co-founder and CEO of Sea Forest, come on up, Jonathan Loban, head of brand M.J.Bale, Angela Winkle, Chief Sustainability Officer of R.M. Williams, and the simply sensational Samantha Noon, who you'll know as a leading agri-food tech journalist, facilitating this conversation. Welcome to evokeAG.
So great to have you guys all here. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we're all part of the fashion industry. The clothes we wear each day and the purchasing decisions we make. The global industry is worth around $1 trillion this year. However, it attributes 10% of global emissions. So, like was discussed in the last panel session on the 4 Cs, supply chains can be problematic. You know, it's not uncommon for a garment to traverse a number of countries. So on that note, I think it'd be great to dive into how Australia's fashion industry is lowering its emissions to meet net zero and what forms of fibre production and innovations hold the greatest potential. Angela, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think this is critical and that we look all the way back to fibre, because really the majority of the impact of the fashion industry comes from fibre production and fibre processing. And so really, as we at R.M. Williams are looking at our environmental impact, it's about what are we sourcing, where are we sourcing it from, and what happens to it end of life, which also goes to what fibre it was to begin with. But for us, we've made commitments. Our strategy is called Crafting a Better Future. That includes both our social and environmental commitments. But when we talk about the fibres and really our largest environmental impact, we're looking at where do we get our leather from and how is it processed, and then also what fibres we're actually using. Are we using blends? Are we using synthetics, natural fibres? What is that mix? And where are they coming from? Because there is such a huge difference when you're sourcing one type versus another.
Yeah. And Sam and Jonathan, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think obviously we'll talk about the work we're doing in merino wool, but I think there's great seaweed producers that have popped up in WA. A company called Ulu that are creating a natural polymer, so it's a hard and soft plastic replacement. So we're working with them on plastic buttons, which sounds, so micro, and it's a start. But they also, the potential for them is to create almost like a nylon replacement. So you can imagine all the activewear brands in the world, whether it's Lululemon or Adidas or even, Skims or something, being able to replace synthetic petrochemicals with a seaweed is huge. And Sam, I think you provided the seaweed for them, didn't you, or some of it?
Yeah, we did. We worked with Ulu in WA to provide that, raw material that went into them being able to make the buttons for M.J.Bale, so closing the loop, which is really nice to see. I guess the way I think about this question is really in the context of my career before seaweed, which was in the fashion industry and was, we were in sustainable fashion when the word was sort of a new term, I guess, in the space. And, at that time, there wasn't a HE index or a sustainable apparel coalition. We were looking at supply chains and thinking about how do we measure and report the social and environmental impacts. And it was just a blank canvas in a way. What I've seen over the last 20 years is huge amount of innovation. The leaps and bounds in terms of resource allocation, and the amount of water that we use to grow cotton now is about, I think it's maybe less than half that it used to be. There were less chemicals. Innovations that have delivered significant reductions in our emissions, better social outcomes for what are the, in terms of manufacturing, some of the lowest paid workers in the world. So I think we have to recognise how far we've come, first and foremost, recognise and acknowledge where we are on that journey in terms of, we still are still creating an impact, and then also look at, what are the opportunities, and whether it's in sort of zero input feed sources like seaweed to create fibres. That's really exciting. Whether it's 3D printing and other things. There's a lot of innovation that's still to come. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and on that movement that you're speaking about, you have both M.J.Bale and Sea Forest have a partnership together, and I'm keen to learn more about your net zero woolen knitwear partnership and what was involved to achieve carbon neutrality. And I guess, how do you envisage this concept being scaled to deliver return on investment? And I know that we've got some photos as well of the seaweed growing. And so, yeah, keen to hear from both of you on that.
Yeah, I mean, net zero knits, where do you start? It's also new. 2020, I think we started feeding 48 merino sheep, Asparagus seaweed at our Kingston farm, our single source partner in Tasmania. We got 105 kilograms of wool, beautiful, same amazing quality and consistency that Kingston is known for. And normally with our single source suiting and tuxedos, it's all Kingston wool that gets sent to Vitello Barberis Canonico in Italy. They're almost 400 years old, 17 generations of the same family, one of the best weavers in the world. So they wanted it, and we said, yeah, great, you can have 3/4 of it, 75 kilos. And I know this sounds on a minor scale, but the natural question then went, well, we can't just send this wool overseas. And we're relatively entrepreneurial at M.J.Bale, and so we said, well, let's try and get it, processed, carded, spun, hand knitted all here in Australia, in regional Victoria. And we found this mad sailor. Oh, he hates when I call him mad. He's eccentric in the most wonderful way. I'd called like 50 people to try and find a cyclist and a sailor who could take it from Kingston Farm near Launceston and sail it across the Bass Strait. And he was the last one that took my call. And anyway, he only has a bicycle, an engineless boat, and a kayak. So he cycled it out from Kingston with our CEO, Matt Jensen, and then he started it across the Bass Strait and then cycled it around. And it was, the footprint assessment that we just got back for that, is just, it is incredible. But the biggest emissions was, we had this beautiful knitter called Val. She's from Ballarat. She lives in a retirement village, and she's a gun knitter. And when we got the assessment back, the biggest footprint came from the TV that she was watching when she was knitting it, because she loves sport, and also 2 dogs had stayed in a hotel room for about 3 or 4 out of about 60 nights. So yeah, but it's really just at the beginning. And
yeah, I think, so M.J.Bale, obviously I've known Matt and Jono since, when I was my days in the fashion industry, and so I was talking to them about the work that we were doing. And then, it came to the possibility of working on fibre, not just beef and dairy. So I guess just for the context and for everybody's benefit, we grow a specific red seaweed that's native to Australia that can, when fed in very small dietary inclusions to livestock, reduces methane emissions by up to 98%. So this was obviously discovered by the CSIRO but had a huge bottleneck at the time, and that no one knew how to grow it. So our business, Sea Forest, came along to establish methodologies for cultivation, and now we have that product at scale. But we need customers, and those customers need to be able to communicate to the public how this works, and that was where the M.J.Bale story sort of again closes the loop for us. And it was really exciting. We've had operational challenges, so we've obviously grown the seaweed. We have assets down in Tasmania on the southeast coast where we grow the seaweed on land, and also in a very large marine lease. We have a hatchery and laboratory, and a whole lot of marine biologists and engineers that work for the business. But on farm, to actually feed this product, it means going out and getting to your livestock every day. So there was challenges, and
it's labour intensive.
And it was exciting to be able to work with farmers in a practical sense to deliver, what is a fantastic outcome, I think.
Yeah.
World's most expensive knits, though, Sam. It's it's labour intensive, and we thought in the beginning, oh gosh, is this potentially unscalable? But it didn't let it stop us, because it was a world first. No one had ever fed this to sheep. I remember when I first met you, and I said, oh, who are you working with from Merino? And you said nobody. But we're just about to announce a partnership with an Australian university where we're bringing in a machine from overseas to make fully fashioned knits on the spot here in Australia.
In 30 minutes, or?
About 30 minutes,
30 minutes,
about
that's
30
impressive.
minutes. And I know the thought is, well, we'll lose out knitters like beautiful Val with her, sport. But at the same time, we've just done 1.3 tons of methane-reduced wool in our second year. And, hopefully it allows us to get it, processed, carded, spun, all here in Australia, and somehow, in our own small little way, contribute to the revitalisation of the Australian wool industry.
Yeah, and on that note of doing things in Australia, I'd love to go to you, Angela, and speak about R.M. Williams. They have experienced big changes in the last few years with Twiggy Forest's Tatarang takeover in 2020, which has renewed investment into localised production, which is great, and various commitments to decarbonising the business. So as part of your Crafting a Better Future strategy, which you've mentioned just previously, I'd like to share with the audience to better understand some of those in-house changes that you've made and the importance of movement around these emissions and making change rather than, I guess, ticking boxes, which we've heard a little bit in the last day.
Yes. So, R.M. Williams has had sustainability principles embedded from the outset. We're 90 plus years old, and the product is a product that's designed to last for decades and be repaired. And so it's very, very anti-fast fashion and the circularity. But beyond that, in terms of where materials came from, and the processing, that hadn't been part of the sustainability sort of remit. And so I think with the Andrew and Nicola Forrest coming in and the Tatarang team, the expectations and commitment to sustainability has just been a complete step change. And now we really have a mandate to be a leader on sustainability holistically, not just on those products that last. And what that actually means is sort of multi-fold. We're moving to 100% renewable energy. We already have some on-site renewables, but we'll be moving to 100%, which will get us to almost carbon neutral or net zero manufacturing, which is our goal. We are looking at where we get our leather from and really trying to build new supply chains that can be regenerative, climate positive supply chains, and that requires traceability all the way to farm, which is a complete change in the way our supply chains operate. Similarly for textiles, cotton, wool, we need the same traceability and the same shift in sourcing. But to get back to your actual question about Australian made as well, we always have and will continue to make almost all of our boots here in Adelaide in our workshop. We also make a lot of our apparel, so about 65% of our sales are from Australian-made products. We are trying to increase that though, and so that means really finding those sources, and we've run into the same challenges of the capabilities aren't there for every stage of the supply chain anymore in Australia, and so we're finding all of those partners we can in Australia and really trying to invest and build them up and figure out, okay, well, where do we put the orders so we can really grow that as much as we can and then continue to grow over time in terms of our Australian made.
Yeah, and so on that note around Australia's capabilities, I'm keen to hear from all three of you around this, but maybe just finishing off this topic here around, how Australia can improve its capabilities from manufacturing right through to traceability and accreditation systems of a product's life cycle. So a consumer can have a better idea of the footprint of that product. So what do you think some of those areas are? And go to Jonathan after and Sam.
Yeah, and I think there's not a single answer to this. It's quite difficult given that these industries have been set up in a way that did not encourage traceability for so many years. And so we're really changing the way relationships work. And so I think about it as coming in two directions. There's a top-down version, which is to say we want this certification, and then we need transaction certificates that trace the product all the way from the grower through production. There's also setting up relationships like Jonathan's talked about, with the single source farm,
Yeah.
which is to say we're going to build it's not vertically integrated in that we don't own it all, but it's vertically collaborative, that we have the relationship with every stage of the supply chain so that we have traceability, but also we have partnership to deliver better outcomes. And we really need both of those to deliver this at scale.
Yeah, I think biggest opportunity, the biggest blue sky for us is in Australia is we've got the best scientists in the world. Biotech, ag, and fashion should be working together. It's our, we're leaders in the world. But we've been lucky in that we work with a single farm, with two. There's Ashby in the Midlands of Tasmania and Ross, and then Kingston, and then the Weaver. Traceability and verification is important. And the best thing we've got going for us is this next generation, Gen Z and our children's generation, because they're label turners. It's common to them to check the provenance and the place of origin. So, it's only going to grow more. And, if we want to export internationally, we're going to have to abide by a whole set of criteria, whether it's, tax or tariffs. And Sam, you'd know more with the, methane emissions, with the pact between EU and the US?
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly traceability and the integrity of some of these claims is really important, and consumers are becoming, I think, aware and certainly wanting to be more informed, even expecting actually more transparency around claims that are being made, and for good reason. I think that then that helps those that are doing the right thing really differentiate themselves from those that are not, because we do know that sustainability can in some cases cost more. It's operational considerations and costs, and they should be rewarded appropriately. But I think so these frameworks will be not only important for business practices, they'll be important for finance, they'll be important for export markets, they're going to be important to attract consumers, and they're going to be also critically important in building trust between brands and their customers. But just to Jono's point on the methane piece, so we feed a seaweed product to livestock, it reduces methane emissions. It's got an outcome that is emissions avoidance. But in order for a farmer to realise the value from that, they would need a carbon credit. There isn't a carbon credit that exists today. We've got to build the methodology that requires, a regulatory pathway involving the Clean Energy Regulator and the Emissions Reduction Fund, the federal government, and there's a lot that goes into building out these sort of frameworks. And so I think it's one, important that everybody's engaged in the process. So if you've got your brands driving it, potentially consumers feel that there's the appropriate amount of transparency, but all stakeholders are involved in the process is also critically important. So I guess just to round that out, we're hoping that now that the Chubb review has been completed of the emissions of the Clean Energy Regulator, which was one of the first things that the federal government did when they came into office, that now we'll be able to focus on getting that method up maybe in the later part of this year, which will then see the benefits of carbon credits flow to the industry.
And speaking of the role of government and how we can scale up the industry and drive innovation, where does Australia's agri-food and fibre industries need investment most, and to accelerate this innovation, and what role does R&D and government play in us meeting those goals? And keen for you to continue and then go to Angela.
Sure. So I guess in the context of what we do, and which is loosely, integrated into the supply chain of fashion, but the role of government is to provide either the carrot or the stick. And we prefer a collaborative approach, as I said, but it is important that if we've set emissions reduction targets to 43% and we've signed a methane pledge which relates to livestock production, and that we have this solution growing in our oceans which can provide an incredible outcome, that we need to now actually collaborate to realise that outcome. And so you need these sort of frameworks. So government has to then think about its role in implementation. So how do we then bring the industry along and find appropriate measures? So we always talk about carrots and sticks. I prefer a carrot, if you like. I think we need to collaborate. We have a very impressive Australian agricultural sector, in the global landscape, and this is just another opportunity.
Yeah. And Angela, in terms of implementation, where do you see opportunities for further collaboration or better collaboration?
With government?
Yeah, with government and driving investment, and whether or not that's R&D, government, where are the opportunities within the supply chain, within the industry, for agriculture more broadly, so that it's, relevant for everyone?
I might twist the question a little bit, but then come back to it, because I do think the big role, and Sam just touched on it, for government is setting the frameworks and standards that you can coalesce around. One of the big challenges is that there are so many standards, frameworks, certifications, that how do you know which one is greenwashing, which one is robust, how do you compare them? And I think there is a role for government. I think the climate active certification here in Australia has seen sort of good uptake and has credibility in the industry. Then there's a question of, well, how does that connect to other certifications? The EU is about to pass a legislation about due diligence and products, and there's just more and more regulatory pressure. There is both pressure, but then there's also gaps in terms of what's a definition of regenerative or climate positive or all of these things. And so I think in between industry and government, sort of having some of those definitions that just simplify things for everyone and people can work to the same goals can be a huge advantage. And then I would say, I think, R&D into the types of innovation that Sam's working on and across the supply chain, I would add, but I think Sam's kind of captured.
Or other brands like M.J.Bale to utilise. So, what are your thoughts?
Look, I think perfection is the enemy of progress. And the thing is, Angela and I were talking about it outside, when you start opening the hood and, assessing your footprint and, starting the sustainability journey, it's a leviathan, it's a monster, and you want to change everything instantly, but you can't. And you just need to start and get momentum. It's like, I don't know if anyone here has read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. It's not on the New York Times bestseller list, so no worries. But he was a very virtuous man, and he wanted to become the most moral person in America, and he listed 13 virtues. One was temperance, not drinking too much or eating too much, and listening or not speaking, and abstinence. And he tried to work on all of them at once, and it was a failure. It actually made him, he thought, less moral. And so he made a list and he just worked on one per week, and he'd make a little dot next to it, and he was able to progress. And and I think kind of energy begets energy, and it's still yes, we're at the bottom of a ladder, but it's a ladder we all want to climb. And I think momentum is key.
Yeah, and speaking about the consumer, when we're looking at, we've mentioned slow fashion. There's two ends of the spectrum. We've got slow fashion, we've got fast fashion, and there's something like 1 in 3 pieces of clothing made every year go to landfill, and 40% of a collection will end up discounted. So there's clearly an overproduction issue here, and I'm interested to know your thoughts on how we can adjust this consumption model, and where does the responsibility land between consumers and brands, while acknowledging the role that short-term costs in terms of businesses to businesses and customers versus those long-term rewards for the planet. So, Angela, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, and actually from the session this morning, I think the point was made that if the consumer's not paying for it, somebody in the supply chain is paying for it.
Yeah.
And that is the challenge we're working with. And if you look at fast fashion, that is enabled by cheap textiles, and cheap textiles are enabled by poor labour and environmental practices in countries across the world. And so a lot of this comes back to that traceability, understanding where materials are coming from, who's producing them and how, and then really looking at that and saying, are we comfortable with that? And for, as you start to pull back the layers, most times the answer is no, and we have to change it. To your question on the role of the consumer in fast fashion, I think in part as this is becoming more and more known, like the requirement now for modern slavery statements and companies actually doing that work, you're seeing more of an expectation from consumers, but it's still not all the way there. So there is a responsibility of brands to really be to be looking at that, and if the price needs to go up because we're receiving cheap goods because people aren't being paid, well, then that's sort of a that has to be tackled. That can't be the way things are. So that's not actually an answer. It's a really difficult situation in the industry. But I would say I think more and more consumers are aware of how long garments last for, whether they're actually wearing things. I think through the pandemic, when a lot of people spent a lot of time at home, there was a lot more awareness of why do I have all this stuff? And there's more consciousness, but we've still got a long way to go.
And on that point, I was keen to hear from you about the circularity point. And also, I mean, we look at brands like R.M. Williams or Patagonia, who are some of those businesses that are taking extra time to invest into their business to make those products or to enable choices for customers to bring back a product like their R.M. Williams boot. So
yes, yeah. So as I said at the start, R.M. Williams has had those circularity principles from the outset. We want the product to last a lifetime, which is not an actual lifetime, but a life well lived. So people own their boots for 20, 25, 30 years, and they come back and get them repaired. So our repair service is a huge part of our business. We sell care products. We want those products to last, and we would much prefer you buy the one boot that lasts for 20 years than buy 10 pairs of boots because they keep falling apart. So that system has many parts to it. The first is design for integrity. The testing that our boots undergo is quite incredible. I've seen some kind of people try to pull them apart with various tools as part of the testing, and for the most part it can't be done. There's the care, there's the repair. We have a refurbishment campaign called Remade, which has been a periodic campaign to date, but eventually will be a mainstay. And then tomorrow, actually, we're launching boot recycling, so you can bring back your boots to store and we will recycle them. The idea being that after you've cared for them, repaired them, we've got all of they've walked all the steps that they can walk in their lives. We will take responsibility for that product because we don't want it ending up in landfill. And so we take them back and we have a recycling partner where they then go to new uses.
And Jonathan?
It's pretty hard to top that. I mean, there's nothing more sustainable than a pair of boots that last you for life, is there? Yeah. Look, I think for us, our two-piece merino wool suit, it should last you, decades if looked after. So I think the onus is on us to educate the consumer so that it does last longer. Merino wool is a fibre that will do that. So yeah, it's definitely, I'd say consumer education is the key.
Yeah, and I also think, in your question about, what do we do about this situation, depends, who's we. And I think if we is some type of governing body that suggests that this is the standard in which we produce fibres, we manufacture clothes, and, these are the appropriate wages to pay in certain jurisdictions, then we create that, framework. Then the industry has to follow. And if they're not complying, it's like illegal fishing in the ocean. They're just not allowed to do it. Yeah. So I think my feeling is that the onus is on the consumer. We've got to stop buying cheap crap all the time, just following the latest trends. And we've got to really focus on quality over quantity. And we've got to rely on brands like R.M. Williams and others and M.J.Bale that are producing goods that are going to last a long time. I think it's critically important. It make a huge difference to the footprint of the industry.
We'll go to questions shortly, so if anyone has any, have a think about that. But just lastly, where do you see opportunities for greater collaboration between Australian agricultural industries and the fashion industry? And I think for you, Sam, it's been an interesting one, acting as the link between the producer and the corporate. And so, yeah, keen to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think, we were talking about this earlier, but our business is essentially a B2B. We provide a a feed supplement that goes into the supply chain. It's then fed to animals that can then be sold as low emissions beef or low emissions fibres or dairy products for that matter. But the role we're sort of playing is also one of sort of consumer awareness that you can actually have a low methane product, and that there is this, livestock emissions represent about 70% of our agricultural emissions, so it's a huge problem. And but we have this solution, and so the education piece is really important. Then then working through the supply chain with, so for example, this is also not in fashion, but a few weeks ago we launched a burger with the burger chain Grilled, and so it's the first time that there's been low methane products really, and apart from the M.J.Bale suits and knits, that consumers have been able to sort of purchase and eat the products, which it doesn't taste any different. It's like really people can start to become normalise it, if you like. But what's been really interesting is that this has been not only us working with a burger chain to then bring a product to market, but it's also been a social experiment for that business where they've said to their customers, upgrade to save the planet. And so they have to pay $1 if they want this particular beef patty. And so, lots of people, and we've seen it with things like Qantas offset programs, where I think they did a focus group early on, and they found that 40% of their customers said that they would pay for offsets. And then when it came to practical terms, there's only about 10% of customers actually really pay. And so this has been this whole parity between actually customers will pay more for this, and what we're finding is that they're selling out of burgers and they're having to restrain the whole thing. So I guess, I don't know if I've answered your question very well there, but ultimately we live in the supply chain, but we're also partnering to help storytell that product that goes to market, and that is part of the integrity that brand needs to be able to ensure that there's genuine emissions reductions, but also that there's transparency.
Yeah. And Jonathan, finally, speaking to that storytelling and that collaboration and connection that you have with, premium fibres and working with sustainable producers, can you tell us if where are the opportunities for farmers potentially to get more involved in this premium supply chain?
Well, I think seeing the great work that Sea Forest did, I think the biotech and science is a huge opportunity to take that. What Sea Forest did, they took the CSIRO lab science and made it real. You've got Ulu in Western Australia have done something similar with their seaweed. So, I think a lot of, whether it's wool producers or cotton growers, it's, looking for where the innovations are. Mm-hmm. Where's the blue sky? What is a local solution to a global problem? Also, I think just from working with our Kingston farm, is it's a conservationist enterprise, and it's it's a carbon positive, independently accredited, but it's home to threatened flora and fauna, and the regeneration work that goes on down there is significant. It's home to about 8% of all Indigenous grasslands in Tasmania. So what we do is once that wool is woven, made into suits and comes into stores, we have what's called a store to farm rebate, and we give a percentage of every garment sold, whether it's a Kingston tie, tuxedo, and he has to reinvest, the farmer has to reinvest that into projects that preserve the biodiversity, and it's wonderful. And it's educated us. If it wasn't for our work with Simon, we probably wouldn't have gone down the carbon neutrality path. So I think all these wonderful farms and custodians, a lot of merino wool growers are out there. I wish we could work with all of them. I think that's an opportunity is to kind of highlight the good work that they're doing and kind of get in with a weaver, get in with the spinner. That's the important middleman between a middle person between brands is the spinner and the weaver. There's not the scale of production here in Australia just yet. So, yeah.
Potentially an area for further investment.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, have we got any questions from the audience? Yes, number up there.
Thank you. I was just wondering, where's the opportunity for the average grower to get involved? So for like M.J.Bale, you guys have got your farm in Tassie, but is there opportunity to open that up to other suppliers who are also growing wool?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the problem is that we do have a limited capacity, and also you need a certain scale in order to get the spinning and the weaving done. This is my own personal goal. I can't speak on behalf of the company, but this machine that we're bringing in to weave, we're going to weave the methane reduced wool and get it all processed, spun, and then made into nets here. I would love one day to kind of open that up to 20, 30 different wool growers on a rotational basis, and you actually get the consumer, the customer, can choose from their net where they would like the wool to come from, and then they can make that choice based on the different visions and values of that farm. Whether it could be biodiversity, preservation, regeneration. Obviously, they have to have, values that are extremely positive. So yeah, that's again my personal goal. I'm not sure if that was helpful.
If I can jump in there as well, which is that I mentioned there's sort of this top-down, but also how do we build up these vertical supply chains? And so that really is building relationships with individual farms or farming co-ops, to this point about scale, but sort of putting all the pieces of the supply chain together, and that really does start with the farm, and that is our goal, so that we have full traceability, but also that we're working with local growers.
Dale Stevenson from Rabobank. Fantastic what you're doing with M.J.Bale from the sustainability side, and it's a great story. My concern is more, and interested in your comments around how do we gain consumer confidence in the accreditation of these sustainable products, because my view is that is what will create scale. But I think there's a real concern around what am I trying to say? The confidence. We talk about Qantas, for example. Sam, you said that 40% of whatever it was happy to pay for the credits, but only 10% do. And I think that's a real example of that.
Yeah, so I think, what supports our... Look, I'm biased here, right, because we started the business with a strong climate focus. We've got 7 summers until 2030, and we've got a hell of a lot of heavy lifting to do if we're to have the almost 42% emissions reduction that we've, as Australian government has set as our target. So we've got a lot of work to do and not much time left. So we're going quickly, and we need bold actors like M.J.Bale, like Grilled and other partners that we're working with to bring products to market. Before there are these frameworks that we've talked about, there's no carbon credits, and yes, there's no, certified trademark at this point in time. But there is, in all cases, there's a university, an independent party that's signing off on all of this work. So I would say with the Asparagopsis work and the work that we're doing in terms of feeding our supplements to livestock, there's a strong body of evidence from peer-reviewed published papers that show if you put this much in the mouth of an animal, it achieves that much in terms of the outcome. And that data set continues to become more and more robust. Like Grilled, for example, we had these devices on the farm where they were measuring the methane coming out of the animal's mouth, and that was also signed off by the university. So we do have integrity, and we do have that sort of traceability, but also we don't have much time left. These frameworks are an administrative burden that have to be implemented as soon as possible. But I'm with you that they're needed urgently.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It needs to be verified. So the problem we have is that we're at the bleeding edge of it here. So when we did the first trial with the 48 sheep, there was no way to measure the CH4. Actually, there was in Murdoch University. I think they had the machines where you could measure the output, right? So you could see with the Asparagopsis on the sheep, but our farmer, Simon Cameron, quite rightly, he didn't want to send his sheep to WA. And so you guys have green feeders that you work with the beef cattle so they can measure it, but at the moment there's nothing to measure the sheep. And so we've been working on that pretty kind of frantically over the last 18 months, because that's what's required, and it'll give hopefully the consumer what they need. In saying that though, UNE is working on it with Walmart at the moment, right, Sam?
Yeah, so So there's what you can do in a commercial setting, and there's what you can do in an academic and research setting. And so UNE has 10 methane chambers. The devices that animals are going to go and live in for 24 hours. And you're not going to do that at Kingston Wool Farm. We've got this sustainable wool production, and you've got animals in chambers. So it's just, we need that body of work to demonstrate how the product works, but you're not going to be doing that, implementing that on farm. So it's going to be a situation where you need to verify intake and consumption, and then correlate or reconcile that back with the peer-reviewed published papers that show this dietary inclusion equals that in terms of methane outcome. Hope that helps.
Any more questions?
Thank you. I just want to congratulate you. It's fascinating and, you know, compelling what you're doing, and hands out, clapping, whatever, to you for doing it. My question is, so there's about 50 cents worth of cotton in a T-shirt, right? And it's been touched on a couple of times, sort of this concept of separating the commodity from the story that supports it, the data, the narrative, the ecological work, the regen, the whatever. Is there a way, naively, as the bloke at this end of the chain, not that end of the chain, of saying, right, that data you might be happy to pay, or your consumers might be happy to pay a couple of cents, that your brand can then turn that into 10 cents or $1 or whatever? Because a T-shirt, I can buy a T-shirt at Target for $4, or I could buy one for you for, I'm going to say, a little bit more than that. But fundamentally, there's at street value of cotton's about 50 cents in it, right? So is there a way of creating that paradigm where the data's connected to it digitally and is transferred along the supply chain to give you some value that you can't get readily now?
Yeah, I can start. I'm guessing you have a view on this as well. I would say there's a proliferation of companies who are all promising various digital tracking. A lot of it's blockchain based, and it's that all the way along the system, the data is being entered so that it's fully traceable. This is still an early space, and so you know, I think there's questions about which system, and is there one that will become the dominant one, or will it just be that there are multiple? Because I think the problem is when we're asking suppliers throughout the supply chain to be using multiple different systems, whether they be tracking or auditing or data provision in other ways. But yes, the systems are coming online. I think we're just still at this early phase where it's all a bit of the Wild West, and hopefully it coalesces to some more standardised methods.
Yeah, and I believe fibre trace technology and
good.
Good Earth Cotton did a collab with Nobody Denim maybe a year ago, which was you know, a consumer experience to go and scan something that in store and see the whole supply chain.
Yeah, that's a great point actually. So fibre trace, there's a chemical added, and so you can scan the whole way along to see where those fibres have come from.
Yeah.
Jonathan,
verifies it along the whole process.
Did you have anything further to add?
Yeah, look, I think technology is your friend, you know, as much as I personally hate living in the digital age most of the time. You know, I'm a pretty analog guy, but for what you're talking about, you know, the technology is new, probably so new that if I knew about it, I'd be doing it, you know, right away. So I think you're in the right place here at evokeAG. You've probably got to shake hands with a lot of people today and find out who can do it for you.
Trevor Perryman, I'm just, first of all, great work that you're all doing in going down the sustainability path, and there's certainly a market call for it, and there's always this question about cost and ambition of the consumer and the actual ability to pay, and it's that balance that I guess every company's got to deal with as you go through. I guess what I'm hearing from the conference, and also today from Angela too, and maybe a bit from Sam, is the robustness of the systems that are in place. It seems to me that there's a lot of fragmented, the industry itself in sustainability recording, there's a lot of different systems, and it's very fragmented on what you should use. And I guess that's why companies now have got an ambition in that, have got their own sustainability officers to figure out which system to use and what not to use, I guess. And the same, I think, is going on with the carbon measurements. Certainly, as you said, Sam, at the academic level, it's quite analytical, but at the commercial thing, it's a lot of estimates, and I think that was said a little bit yesterday. That's a long way of sort of asking as a comment and then asking your opinion about how far down the track do you think we are on the various sustainability systems / measurements of carbon, and as you said, Sam, we've got this ambitious target for 2030. It seems it's only 7 years or so. It seems we're almost not in a position to accurately record. We're in a position to kind of estimate, I guess. So just comment, really. Thanks.
Well, almost out of time, but some quick.
Yeah, I can answer very quickly. Well, I think just in a short response is that these things, we have a new government and these things are going to be happening quickly. They've set the target, they know what they've got to achieve. But I would also say from being in Egypt last year and part of the Australian delegation, they went with a very strong, and Diana was there as well, but the very strong agricultural contingent. We are, or ag is part of the solution for Australia, and they're going to need to build these frameworks very quickly to ensure that there is integrity and traceability through the system. I believe it will happen in a short space of time, and they're resourcing appropriately.
I agree with your comment, and I think we have to build the plane while we're flying it because we don't have the time to wait. But the systems are at the early stage and fragmented, so it's both.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to all three of you for sharing all of your knowledge and inspiring us all here today.